Welcome to the Fundayao Podcast, where we bridge Africa, China, and make remote sensing accessible. I'm Timo Balz, and today we are diving into one of topics I find very, very interesting at the intersection of conservation, livelihood, and geospatial technology, the human-wildlife conflict. Joining us today from the University of Johannesburg is Professor Walter Musakwa, who is also co-founder of Fundayao. He's full professor in the Department of Geography. He holds a PhD from Stellenbosch University. He serves as different editorial boards. And his research spans conservative planning, geography, also remote sensing. And he has done and supervised lots of research in that field from Zimbabwe and South Africa and other places. Walter, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Professor Timo, for inviting me to this show and looking forward to our conversation.
All right, so let's start with some basics because I don't think our listeners know too much about human-wildlife conflict. So when we say human-wildlife conflict, especially now with you in Southern Africa, what are we actually talking about? What does it look like for communities maybe living next to Kruger National Park?
Well, human-wildlife conflict, it simply means that human beings currently, they are living or they are conflicting with wildlife. Why is that? Because human beings, we are now moving closer to where these animals are staying, and likewise these animals, they are also coming into our spaces, and this is as a result of many things. So this conflict, it normally leads into things like crop raiding, destruction of crops, infrastructure, housing, injury of people, and even death. So that's the conflict. Why is there this conflict? Because human beings are now separated from the animals. The animals, mostly they're in the national, and communities are living quite next to these national parks. So obviously there's going to be some interaction. And also in some national parks in Southern Africa, there are no fences. So they move. And also the other thing is there are these transboundary conservation areas. Animals can freely move, and when they move, they can pass by human settlements.
And from your experience, like you already mentioned a bit, has that changed? Is there more conflict now? Are more people moving more close to the animal parks?
People are clearing land for agriculture. There's population growth. People want to make livelihoods, and some of the land that is accessible is close to these national parks, or it's close to areas where these animals are and frequent. So I think the triple threat of climate change, pollution, as well as biodiversity loss, I think it's also impacting and causing this human-wildlife conflict.
So you worked on that and you analyzed that, and you used remote sensing and different sensors of doing that. Mm-hmm. Can you walk us a bit through what you did? What's your geospatial workflow and what you did with remote sensing there?
All right. Should I talk broadly?
Yeah, let's talk broadly first.
In terms of identifying human-wildlife conflict through remote sensing and geospatial information, there are two approaches. One is using satellite imagery. Number two is using traditional GIS instruments. Maybe it could be GPSs, collars, camera traps, acoustic device. And the other one is participatory mapping through cell phones. Using satellite imagery, I think it's a new thing because of the resolution. I've seen other people doing it using satellite imagery like Pleiades. So you can actually identify particularly large herbivores. So you can identify large herbivores like elephants, maybe giraffes, only on satellite imagery. Then the second is using instruments that can be handheld, tied to a tree or pole, but of course they should have location information. So these days people are so interested in what they call soundscapes. So these soundscapes, they are just instruments or acoustic devices that you place in areas where you think animals frequent so that they can record if they come into contact with communities. It's also the same with camera traps. You can also place them in strategic position. But what is useful is also participatory mapping, getting the people themselves to map these locations. Why is it useful? Because they can record things like date, time, type of animal, the damage that did, and from that, the community itself, they can have their own database that they can then map it, and then they can use this later on. So participatory mapping, I think, is quite efficient, and this can be overlaid on remotely sensed data or imagery or other GIS data sets.
So when you mentioned one thing, I ask two questions. Okay, but one thing first. So you mentioned with Pleiades imagery, maybe you can identify an elephant, right? Or large animal. What type of resolution would you need to do that? Do you have any idea?
I think less than 5 meters or less. I think so. You can.
Okay.
I think I've forgotten the specifications of Pleiades.
No, I think it's 50 centimeter or better. Pleiades has quite good resolution, but it's very expensive. Pleiades is quite expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you need very high resolution.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you want to really see an animal, you can't do that in 10-meter resolution. Right? It's just not there. And then you work a lot with participatory mapping and working with the community there together. Like for me, I'm more remote sensing. I'm sitting in my office. Okay. For me, that seems to be, you need to build up, that seems to be a long time. You need to build up trust and work with these communities a long time together. Am I right?
That is correct.
Yeah, that's not something you can just go there, right? And then please help us.
You cannot do that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So that's a long-term project then.
It's a long-term project, and currently we have got an initiative that we want to start where people can record this human-wildlife conflict with the location and then post the video and the data online. And then later on, we can then map it on a GIS so that we can visualize a story. So it's something that we recently launched. I'm not sure how it will go, but I think it will be successful.
They take a picture and then how do they do that? Do they have to log in a website or they send it somewhere?
There will be a link where they will simply upload, and then from there we will clean that data. So, but this is something that we are doing globally. This organization called Genesis, they are the ones that are running with this, and I'm participating in that program.
Quite interesting. So there's a lot of citizen science. They did citizen science for the earthquake damage for the cultural heritage after the Turkey earthquake. And so they also asked, volunteers to take pictures of the damage and upload that. So I think that's a quite interesting research approach. So you just started, you don't know yet, right?
Yeah, I think like what you mentioned, working with the communities, it's something that we have been doing. And what also works is having these community diaries or individual diaries. This is something that we have asked, because you'll be surprised, some communities record this information. It's just not packaged well. They'll tell you this was the location, this is what happened, these are the pictures, this is the damage. So from that diary, you can actually create your own spatial story. that conflict. And these days, people have got cell phones
Yeah.
In rural areas, and these cell phones, they record all the useful information like the date, the location, and so forth. So, but that information is there, it just needs to be packaged.
Okay. So often they have some diary, some information, but hidden away, and so you try to collect that.
Yes, that is true.
Okay. Now, what type of geospatial intervention could you imagine to help these communities or some park managers to respond or avoid wildlife conflict?
Some geospatial intervention. So, from an academic perspective, it starts as research, but I think these results have to be presented to policymakers, to donors, to funders, and policymakers so that we can raise awareness. Once that awareness is raised, then solutions can be, people can think of solutions. So, for example, this thing of cataloging human wildlife conflict via a cell phone or even a diary, I think it's something that has caught up steam and it is happening in many landscapes. And why are they doing it? So that you can identify particular hotspots. So if there are particular hotspots, then you can come up with maybe some preventative measures or even a response. So, for example, we've done it with communities around Wange National Park, Baidu National Park, created these participatory maps. And I think amongst the communities themselves, it helps maybe to steer that discussion and also to come up with solutions amongst themselves without necessarily relying on the national park. For the national park, their concern could be the animal first and foremost. So, but they also have to arm themselves with information. If they have that information, then they can deal with this human wildlife conflict in many ways because information is power. And for example, in Zimbabwe, I think because of a lot of information that has been gathered from communities by the national parks and the communities themselves, there was a change in the human wildlife conflict legislation. Yes, it takes time, but it is a result of these community voices, the information that the community has. So it has led to some change here and there.
So information is the key. Then the information is often available in some communities, but not really collected. So that's where some of your research come in to really bring it all together. Okay. Nice. Now, you're also working on another topic a bit that's related, that fascinates me, is your intersection with indigenous knowledge, right? You have written also about that. So are there some examples where I'm sure there are examples of where community reported patterns or something are much more clear than whatever you could see in a satellite image?
Because I think there are those maybe weaknesses. It could be vegetation and so forth. So, but communities do have this information or access to this data. So, for example, if damage is in a cornfield, I don't think that damage can be realized from a satellite imagery unless it is very, very high resolution imagery. And some of the damage, it's mobile, particularly for human beings themselves. It cannot be, captured through satellite imagery, but only maybe through pictures and stories. Nevertheless, satellite imagery is useful, particularly in showing corridors where large herbivores like to move, where large herbivores destroy, it could be vegetation, and likely to come into contact with communities. And then if that information from the satellite imagery and the communities is combined, I think it becomes a powerful tool, unlike using perhaps the local knowledge alone or even the satellite imagery alone, because the community might know in terms of the behavior, in terms of the wildlife. So the combination of both, I think it's quite useful, because, for example, we did a map where they would map the human wildlife conflict points manually, and then you can verify with satellite image, and you see that it's actually a corridor. And then what would be the solution? Maybe moving your grazing areas or cropping areas further far away, or other solutions like fencing, beehives, chili papers, chili bricks. But I believe a combination of both is quite useful. The local indigenous knowledge, as well as the satellite imagery and GIS information.
Now, when we talk about satellite image and all of this information, like the communities you work with, they're also kind of like, they don't really often have good access to this data. So how can we democratize? How can we maybe make data more available to the communities?
As academics, we might have, there's also lack of funding, lack of skills, and how to analyze this data. But to make this data open access is a solution, or building some tools that are accessible to the community, like dashboards. So, for example, I know the organizations like Planet Labs, they've got free data, but of course it's not necessarily very, very high resolution, but it can be used maybe for mapping, ground truthing, and even identifying some of these corridors. But these days, there's a lot of open access data sets around. So it's also about making communities aware, training them on how to use these data sets for their own use, because that lack of information and knowledge is something that is quite crucial. So, for example, just telling the communities that you can simply create a location pin for all the conflict locations, and you put that up on Google Earth. Google Earth is for free, and that is something that they can use, to access donor funding, to influence policy, because it is accessible. So those tools such as Google Earth Pro, that the communities can access. And of course, there's the issue of data costs. Most of these tools, they're also available offline. And I think this is what Fundayao is trying to do, to democratize access to geospatial information in particular.
Yes, we also try to not only the data, but also to hopefully teach people how to use the data when it's available, because that can also be sometimes not so easy. And if you get the data, but then don't know how to deal with a satellite image. And you were talking about free data, Planet Labs data available. Now, we work together on Africa, China, remote sensing, cooperation. Just now we launched from Wuhan University, we launched 2 satellites, like hyperspectral remote sensing satellites. Could that help you if it would be free? Let's make it clear, if it would be free.
It would help us if it is free. And from experience, we have also used a lot of Chinese satellite imagery, like Gaofeng. I think also, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correct, Luo Jiao.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are increasingly becoming accessible. And I believe if that hyperspectral data is available, it is quite useful, because it can help us distinguishing the various wildlife as well as the landscapes. And this actually links between academia and practice. I know of other Chinese programs. So, for example, this company, what is it called? Maybe you can help me. HK Vision, is it?
HK
Is it the
Vision.
one?
Yeah, HK Vision, yeah.
Yes, HK Vision, yeah. HK Vision has got a social program, particularly for conservation and helping communities. They make available this data and these tools, and they have had projects in Africa. And if only people are aware and could access these, I think it can be quite a change.
The awareness is one issue, and then the accessibility. I'm gonna ask and check out on what's the data policy gonna be, and the accessibility also. Even if the data is for free, sometimes it's hidden somewhere, right? So before we wrap up, we are running a bit out of time. I want to always keep it short. I don't think people want to listen
Okay.
too long, 2 hours talking. So one last question. If many of our listeners are, early career remote sensing scientists, mostly I think from China, some from Africa, from other places. Do you have one piece of advice, which tools, what projects they could do for conservation, or if they're interested in human-wildlife conflict, where to start?
This is quite a complex one, but
Yeah, sorry.
for remote areas, particularly it could be in China or even in Africa, you have got power through your cell phone. If you can access data and download simple tools such as, I think, Google Earth Pro, it's for free. I'm not too sure about, there's this Chinese mapping, I'm forgetting now. Baidu, yes. Is it accessible for free?
I think so, but I'm not sure how accessible it is in Africa.
Yes.
Oh, no, wait, it is
Baidu.
accessible. Wait, I remember it is accessible. When we were in field work, I think Ronan used it, if I remember it right. He showed us
Yes.
some images. I think that was Baidu Maps.
So I think using those publicly available tools like Baidu, Google Earth, and you start to catalog your data, I think it's quite a powerful tool. Why? Because it can easily be translated or shared with the policymakers. There's no need in terms of special software like ArcGIS Pro, Eradas, and so forth. So you simply capture, and then the information is there, and there's impact. Because what is also missing is the impact. Yes, we do research, but there has to be research for impact. So the local communities, they can use those simple tools to capture the data on human-wildlife conflict, not only human-wildlife conflict, but some of the solutions, and also how they might even enjoy this wildlife. And the good thing is these tools, they are easy to share, transfer, and also understand. The policymakers, they find these easy to understand. So we really have to break that barrier by using these publicly available tools. And then the other thing is also training. Continuous training and awareness is something that is crucial. In that way, you can actually make a big change, particularly when it comes to human-wildlife conflict.
Thank you so much, Walter, for sharing your time.
For inviting.
Our listeners, if you like that, or if it sparked an idea or question, or if you have idea for collaboration, reach out to us. We are built on this connection. Actually, Fundayao wants to connect us all together. So thank you, Walter, and thank you, listeners.